Hello, everybody. This is Zeus Caraval from ZK Research for another episode of Real Time Recorded.
I think Zeus, I think you mean Aloha.
Aloha, that's right. You can see my, if you want to have a quick look outside, you can see I got a nice view of the ocean here from my hotel room in Hawaii. It is week 5, though, Dave. We're already into February. That went by fast, but I missed the snow, though, in New England. I guess they got pounded with about 20 inches of snow there, though. So, and the entire country, the continental U.S., I guess, is expected to have a deep freeze this.
No snow in Colorado, but it is cold.
Yeah, well, it got down to the 60s last night, so I feel your pain, buddy.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. Anyways, so this week we're starting to see more and more news pick up. Enterprise Connect's coming up, obviously. UC Expo, I think, was last week and part of this week. And we had some news. This week, Poly, actually, it still trades under the ticker symbol PLT, announced their quarterly earnings, and they also announced a bunch of new devices. I know, Dave, you had some very specific product level detail on the device, so I won't touch on that too much, other than from some of the innovation I saw, they're actually solving some of the bigger problems with some of these consumer home devices and some of the issues that you have with working from home. One of them is that I liked is the little camera. They came out with this thing called a P5. They talked about having just an 80-degree field of view. And I've been asking the manufacturers for a while, stop making wide-angle lenses. Not everybody wants their entire home shown on camera.
Well, that's easy for you to say, Zeus. You've lost a lot of weight.
Well, that's true. So, but I still don't need, even if you haven't, you still don't need a field of view this big. The desktop unit actually had a very cool thing. They said it had vanity lighting, so it had lights all around the screen to light people up. I asked, why not just put that on the smaller cameras as well? And I asked Javed Khan that, or he was asked that on the last WebEx update, and they just said it's cost related. But I can't imagine it's that much cost, because right now what's happening is people are buying these ring lights and these external lights, and they clip onto the back of your computer and things like that. And that's kind of cumbersome. I will say, though, that I was sort of wrong about Plantronics and Poly. I knew they'd get some uptick from work from home, but I did think that they would feel increasing pressure from Logi and some of the lower end guys, and that you wouldn't see them perform quite as well as they did. But they had another really good quarter. They crushed this quarter. Their earnings were $1.47. The street was expecting 94 cents, and so that's 59 cents. They beat, and up from 30 cents a year ago. They've now beaten earnings 4 quarters in a row, and the stock's been on a tear. It was about $44 last time I checked today. The stock was 12 in September, and it was about 8 when the pandemic started. And so clearly the pandemic has helped them. But I think you're seeing good execution here, and I think a lot of this has to do with the team Joe Burton in place before he left as CEO. They hired Carl Wiese to head up sales. Yep. He had a lot of experience doing collab sales at Cisco. They hired Tom Puro to fix the product issues. And Tom, I remember pre-pandemic, they did have an analyst event in San Jose, and Tom talked a lot about the problems that they had, before his arrival, having different software streams, and so features were inconsistent and things like that. But they seem to have brought the Poly technology and the platform and the Plantronics technology together, so you get the best of kind of the audio capabilities of Plantronics and the best of the video capabilities of Poly, and marry those things. They've got really a pretty good company now. So I wasn't sure about Dave Schill as the new CEO, but he seems to be executing really well since he's arrived. So this is a company that they're legit, and I think this trend will continue. I do wish they changed their ticker symbol from PLT, though, because I think that's confusing.
Yeah, they need to change that. Dave is making a lot of changes, very execution focused. They've hired a new guy from Lenovo to address supply chain issues. That's been their biggest problem. And that X Series product they introduced October 2019 was actually a really big hit, but they just couldn't build them fast enough. They couldn't get the parts. So fixing supply chain enough is going to help their sales. And where they've really had a hole in their portfolio, I mean, you have their headsets, but where they really had a hole was the video side was on the personal side. And so they've introduced this, the the P series, which I assume stands for personal. Could stand for Plantronics. It could stand for Polycom. Could stand for Poly. I don't really know, but it probably stands for personal, because all three products that they've introduced are personal products. You've mentioned the camera, the P5. There's the P15, which is more of a USB speaker camera, like
a mini bar.
Bar. And then the P21 was the most interesting. It's a display. It's not a computer. It doesn't have a compute capability, but it's a display with a built-in. I call them AV displays. It's a monitor that you plug in with a single connection to your computer, and then you have your camera and your speakers, and so it really kind of cleans up a desktop. And what they did, and you already mentioned it, was this, I hate the word vanity. I always, vanity seems like the wrong word, but vanity lights. Like a passing vanity. You're so vain, you probably think this monitor is up for you or something. But they put lights on the side, which I've actually been complaining about this for years. And I've bought some of these LED lights and LCD lights for years, and none of them really work really well. They've gotten a lot better recently, but they've got these built into the monitor now. And the nice thing you mentioned about a camera, the problem with putting a light on a camera is you're looking at the camera, and so you'll be blinded by the lights. But a monitor is big enough that the lights can be off to the side. You can still look at the camera. And I think this is just so freaking obvious. And I've been, like I said, been complaining about this for years. Why aren't the video companies? They're dealing with great cameras. They're dealing with great sound technologies, but lighting is the problem that we have in all of our meetings. And so I'm really happy to see that Poly is moving into that. I expect others to move into that. I'm not going to go too much into the products. We actually have a podcast coming up with Tom Purro. We'll go into the individual products in that. What I'm really kind of looking for, though, from Poly, which hasn't happened since the companies merged, is new phone refresh. I'm looking for new phones. They said in their quarterly update that they're seeing an uptick in phones, which is nice. And I don't know what's going to happen with phones. I don't know if they're going to go more toward the video first phone, like the Facebook portal or something like that, where it's really more of a screen than a phone, which I think would be a logical thing to do. But even more logical for Poly to do would be some sort of integrated headset, which they haven't made a phone with an integrated headset yet. We've seen that from some other makers. I think that makes a lot of sense too. So, and then one other thing we're going to talk about here on the next topic, but a lot of these video companies are moving toward touchless interfaces. And I think what Poly did was kind of interesting. They came out, they announced a partnership with a company called Microban. And, I've got an advanced degree in telecommunications, so I can't say this word right, but antimicrobial technology. How do you say that? I don't know. Never covered it in telecom school. But I think that's an interesting idea to put a antimicrobial material on their devices. Is another way of dealing with the post-pandemic return to work type of stuff. So a lot of really interesting stuff from Poly. So along those lines, Zoom also made an announcement about how they are updating their room systems to make them safer for the return to work. And we've seen this kind of, a lot of the companies are coming out with that. They're kind of staggering them out, but it's okay. No one's rushing back to the office just yet. Now, I'm not a fan of speech control. A lot of companies are doing speech control. There's nothing really wrong with it. They were doing this.
That's the way of the future, man.
You think so? They were doing that before. I saw a number of demos where they were using Amazon Echoes and different various companies, not doing that necessarily, but various companies start meeting, whatever. And it always just seems strange to me because it's not that hard to start a meeting. They put a big button on the screen, push here. I don't need a speech interface for this stuff. But what I really prefer over speech is the way that Zoom is doing this actually with the pairing of your smartphone. I got no problem touching my own product, my own products, and so if you can easily pair with your smartphone, that's another way of simplifying or reducing the amount of touch of public stuff. They also had the air quality sensors. Neat's been putting that in the equipment from day one. I've never really understood. I mean, maybe Zeus, you've got some point of view on this with the IoT angle, but unless they can detect virus in the air or something. I don't really know how you're going to use that air quality information in these meetings, but I'm sure we'll find a way. Big data, I'm sure we'll find some way. What I did find most interesting about the Zoom announcement was the concept of a virtual receptionist. And I've heard lots of virtual receptionist ideas before, not from a video company like this. They're basically taking their meeting room technology, putting it in a lobby with a button to talk to somebody, and you have a virtual receptionist that comes on a big screen instead of on a phone or something small, and helps you out and figures out who you need to meet with and stuff like that. I thought that was very clever.
Yeah, the speech versus phone thing, it's interesting, but I do think you need to give people options. I think once you get into, obviously the big hit start button here thing, is pretty easy to use. But if you pair to your mobile device, remember, you get a lot of older executives and things like that maybe aren't as comfortable bringing up. It's not that hard. My dad can use an iPhone, right? So most people can. But still, there's some that would still call their admin to come in and start the meeting. In that case, speech would actually do a better job. So I think the key here is options.
That's a big assumption, though, because my experience with speech is it doesn't do a better job. I'm always having to repeat, did you say whatever? And it's like, no, it's not what I said. So I'm not convinced speech is a better UI.
Well, it's gotten better. I will admit, I do get frustrated with some time, especially when you're trying to change maps and stuff in your car. You wind up just, in theory, you could wind up actually just grabbing your phone, but you're not supposed to do that anymore. And of course, I wouldn't do that. Right. But there are some places where speech helps. Like when I'm out cycling and stuff, I want to, call Siri up to change a song or something. That's much better than having to stop. I will say, though, that I have been impressed with what Zoom has done with rooms. They early on, the Zoom rooms was a disaster. I remember talking to one of their customers a couple of years ago that threw the stuff out because it required so many cables and a PC and multi-vendor.
At one point, it was a shopping list. You ask Zoom for a room system, they give you a shopping list. It was like, go buy an iPad and go buy you had to put the whole thing together yourself. I mean,
and I remember writing something pretty critical about it, and they reached out to me and said, well, we have a whole pro services division that'll help you get it set up. And I'm like, that's the point, right? You shouldn't need a pro services division to get your meeting room set up. But, the partnership with Neat, I think, is going to play big dividends. I'm waiting for Eric Yuan to pull the trigger and buy them. I guess just has to, get comfortable with OJ, I guess, or something like that. But I do suspect that they probably will down the road. I think it's they do seem committed, though, to offering partnerships up. But I think this is a case where Zoom, you look at what Zoom was really good at was online video meetings. They've gotten better at phones. They've gotten better at security. They're getting better at rooms. And I think this is just going to be another kind of piece of the puzzle if customers want to go, have that enjoy that all Zoom experience. So we used to, meet happy, and now we can meet happy within rooms. And however the interface is, it's important to give people options.
For our third topic in week 5, we'll talk about Microsoft Viva. It was announced this week. It's actually a pretty complex announcement. There's a whole bunch of things going on here. So the first part of it is they introduced this concept of a EXP, or Employee Experience Platform, and that's kind of a new thing in itself. So there's that. You have to get your head around that thing, and then it's made up of different modules and all these different capabilities, and some of them are available right away, and some of them are going to be available in the future. So then there's the whole thing about what all these different pieces are, and then there's the third piece that they're doing this whole thing on Teams, which is of course most interesting to us. And so I'm going to talk about the first and last one there briefly. The first one, I like the concept a lot of an EXP. I imagine that we're going to see more of them. The basic concept is that its employee engagement is right now done through a bunch of siloed different activities that includes everything from benefits to training to onboarding, all kinds of stuff that companies do, typically in different siloed applications. And Microsoft says it's time to rethink that. They're using a MRP or ERP kind of an analogy, how it's going to revolutionize everything over time. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about this. And I actually really, I think the timing is right. And Microsoft talks about this, that as we're looking at going back to the office and we're looking more at digital transformation and we're looking at hybrid offices and people being remote, we need to rethink employee engagement, and now is the time to do that. So all of that, kudos to Microsoft. I think the EXP concept is a great thing to have people start talking about. I love that. And again, really ties into the whole digital transformation conversation. The thing that I get confused about is why they're doing this on Teams. And so in the ERP example, it was a traditional, and this is what Microsoft does very well, traditional client server application, everything from Exchange, Dynamics, all kinds of Microsoft apps have a basic server in the background and a client that you install. And that's Microsoft's models worked very well for 30 years. This is a very distributed architecture. So there's different modules, and they're using Teams as the vehicle to deliver these modules. They've announced 4 modules at first, and then they've made it very clear there'll be more modules that come. And so it's a very complex idea, and Teams won't even do all of it. Some of it says some of these will be delivered just through SharePoint or through Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Some of it will be through Teams. So it's a distributed client, distributed backend, very, I don't know, I was going to say very 2021, maybe very 2030. I don't know quite how to describe the architecture, but I can see some benefits to using Teams as the vehicle. Teams is envisioned as an enterprise-wide application, so you'll have a strong reach. It's got built-in calling, messaging, and meeting, and so that's clever. One of the modules is called Topics, and that's about information discovery. And one of the benefits of a messaging app like Teams is the knowledge base that it builds and how you can find experts in the company. And so I could see all of that, a lot of logic there. But the idea here is Teams as a platform, and I have to question. So is the browser. The browser is a platform, and you can build browser apps, and particularly if you're trying to reach first-line employees, which may be using personal devices, why have an app? I mean, just use a browser. And so it seems the Teams app is kind of heavy or kind of fat, kind of complicated. It does a lot of things, and I'm not quite sure the benefit of using Teams here as the vehicle. Thoughts on it, Zeus?
I'd like to just see them get Teams right first before they add more functionality to it. Obviously, it's very widely deployed. We argue with one of our with Kevin Keeler all the time about the quality of Teams, but it's pretty clear people buy it, or people use it because of licensing. I'll give you a quote from a user who texted me the other day about Teams, because Teams is like a high school garage band. They sounded awful when they started, but it was rapidly been developing into a decent portfolio of Led Zeppelin cover songs. They're not ready to charge admission, but it's getting there, right? And so that's a pretty heavy Teams user, and when I use it, I get frustrated that it takes a long time for the WebRTC version to come up. So maybe go fix that and get it working as well as Zoom or WebEx work first before you go adding more things to it. I do kind of applaud Microsoft for trying to solve something really hard, which is, can you really measure employee experience? This is something they actually might be able to do, right? They seem to not be able to do the small things well, but they tend to do the big things well. They got a huge R&D division.
It's a long game. Yeah.
But they can't. But it's but then you talk to Microsoft users where they put documents in SharePoint and you can't see those in Teams, and that seems like an obvious kind of thing to bridge together, right? So they as a company, in fact, you brought up one of the things that's hard to track user experiences because things are built in silos, right? Well, they built the silos, right? So now they're trying to cross-correlate data across them. I don't know what happened to Microsoft Graph. I think that's still kind of hanging out there in the background. That data could be used in this as well.
I thought the way they described some of these tools that it would replace what Microsoft Graph feeds productivity score, Microsoft productivity score. And productivity score is going to remain, but it's going to be more group focused, and they're going to have more of the individual stuff in Viva. But you talk about these silos. That's where I get really confusing. Not all the silos are Microsoft. I mean, there's things like Workday, and there's various learning management systems and stuff like that. But there's some of the silos of Microsoft. Yammer is one that, and supposedly Viva is going to connect to everything, and it's going to bring all this together somehow. But if it's really more of a portal, then it doesn't seem like it's breaking down silos. It's a long game strategy here. They get points for introducing a great concept. Now we'll have to see 5-10 years how it plays out.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see. I imagine we'll see some proof points along the way. And they've never really been that great at integrating, into in Workday. You mentioned there's ServiceNow. There's a whole bunch of other, Workfront's another one. In fact, there's a whole, number of other businesses. You look at Box. They sell almost, they 100% of their customers, they told me, use either Google or Microsoft stuff, right? And it's just that those two companies do such a poor job at the back end that it created an opportunity for them. So there's a whole bunch of companies that take advantage of these silos by bridging them together. And so, Microsoft, as you said, it is a long game, and it is something they do complicate it fairly well. They don't do simple. That's sort of one of the interesting aspects about them.
Well, that wraps up week 5 of Real Time Recorded. We always say we'll be back next week. We're not always back next week, but it all depends on the news, and we'll see if there's news. We'll be back next week.
I think there'll be news.